we have quite a bit, so we're going to run through these. I have a couple things that we're going to jump around first. And we are going to start first with Senate Bill 2376. And is Becky here? Hey, there you are. Hey, okay, 2376 on your second page. In short, what this is doing, go ahead, introduce yourself. Yeah, hey, Lynn, thanks for being here. In short, what this bill is doing in the youth court records, there was we made an amendment, a bill a couple years ago, protecting Children Advocacy Center forensic interviews. There's been a question to arise that but whether the youth court has to release those, and it's not being given to the district attorneys and thus to the criminal defendants. And so that's caused some issues. And what this is doing is taking that out from under or allowing that the youth court records of forensic interviews are criminal records for purposes of discovery. So with that, correct me if I had anything else incorrect? Sure. Right now, we're going to do that. That's one of those things and for the non-attorneys, that's a constitutional right that the defendants have these records, correct? It is constitutional right. Supreme Court. We're getting it. Take this out. We want to get this first. And died. Got to run back here for the inspection. The records that we already have. The defense. Like I said, we need to have for second order. And take it out or something like that, I can feel. It's kind of our hands. Well, we're going to that. Any questions from the committee? Do I have a motion? Oh, Senator Hobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this just happening in your district or is this happening in districts all over the state?
It is an emerging issue. Our circuit, and we've talked to a lot of other circuits. Basically making automatic standing order for the court judge. judge allowing anything we have in our files to be turned over. The Constitution requires, the Constitution of the United States, Constitution, criminal procedure requires. So they're just doing a standing order. Some judges in certain circuits, and I will call them out right now, some are not doing that. And so they're making them go and file a motion in youth court under each case to ask permission to give discovery to our judge for an in-camera review in circuit court. Then our judges will have to go through all of the thousands of pages and then decide whether the defense is back. Well, of course, the judges say the defense is entitled to anything you have in your case file. And we don't hide the ball in circuit court. This is a youth court. So in youth court confidential, where we are not, we're for an open record. We only based on the rules of criminal procedure or work product. Nowhere is a record involving you going to be work products, right? And I think that what we're asking is that we're not just encompassing CAC records of forensic interviews. The first line of the bill that y'all have in place, the statute says records involving children. That encompasses law enforcement records, crime scene photos, forensic interviews, forensic extractions of a child, any kind of autopsy, anything that I deal with that involves a child is a record involving you for that definition. So we're to our dogs because we do the job, we do the work, we do a good job, but we also have special responsibility that we have to answer to. Fire circuit judges if we cross the line and we release something on Facebook Live or do something crazy, but that's not what's happening. The only time that anything has been disclosed has been usually in civil matters. And this law is a good law. I'm not going to say that what y'all haven't done is great. It's great. It protects this protected
But
material.
This will fix this
Yes.
issue. Okay.
To build an exemption to understand that this isn't chancery court, this isn't youth court, this isn't civil matters, and all of those protections. You have to disclose that with the duty for the Constitution and all of that.
Okay. Any other questions? Senator Simmons?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my question is the process that is in place now where when you're dealing with a criminal matter in circuit court and you go through filing a motion and you have the circuit court involved who works directly with the youth court judge, isn't there protection there in instances where the actual youth court record itself may contain information that should not be going to circuit court despite the criminal matter?
I think it's a record involving a youth, and I think we switch the note on youth court records, just in speaking, but it's truly a record involving children. And so I would say 75% of my cases are records involving children, and youth court doesn't even have a case. They don't even have a collateral matter because CPS will screen out if the perpetrator's not in the home, so they don't open up a case. But all of those referrals go through CPS. They do a cross case to the attorney's office. These we're asking possibly to have to ask permission on 75% of our casework. The youth court judge didn't even know this child, doesn't know this family is going to have to sit through all of this. Where most judges in the state have signed a standing order to get around the current law. The youth court judge will sign a standing order that the defense is entitled to this. We recognize that. And so we are authorizing the state to be able to use this evidence. You can see, as my law said, we are already under your law that you've done, we are already exempt and allowed to have all of this. And we do have it in our case file. We're just asking to not have to go back and ask permission to now disclose it in discovery. And I'm very worried that if we don't disclose it, or it is redacted, or anything what's called excise under the criminal procedure, we have to preserve that and make a record of that for the appellate. So if we run into an issue where maybe later down the road, we're in trial and something becomes relevant, and the defense says, I didn't get that, and the state was referred to something that we didn't get, and then we're all scrambling. That the judge may be excised, but it's part of the record that they didn't get, and she said it wasn't relevant, but now it is relevant, it became relevant.
Did that answer your question? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I kind of sort of, Mr. Chairman, I understand starting at line 95, this existing language. And so these are all the players in a criminal matter that basically have the right to inspect and copy the record that would allow prosecutors to prosecute a crime, but then also allow criminal defense attorneys to get those records that are relevant for regarding that matter involving that youth to defend the crime. But I guess my concern is if the file itself, because I practice a youth court, contains more than just the relevant part for allow you to prosecute the crime, then that should be protected under our youth court.
Is if we don't have it. So any file, the state has not been given through CPS or law. Has been referred. Say a child tests positive for methamphetamine and their parents tested positive as well. They refer that because drugs were then recovered via search. We then have a case file that contains records that were given to us, and the youth court judge then asked us to pursue prosecution.
Well, and I think I can answer this. If you look at line 261, and for those that don't understand or are not familiar with it, in short, any record before it can be released has to have an order from the youth court judge, which is what Senator Simmons is getting at. And then if you look at line 261 involving children as defined, and it says section 4321 right there, that's defining that child. That's limiting it to, so it will not change. To your point, Senator Simmons, it will not change the process. We're not gutting that record, the disclosure of those records. This is just in the case of Brady situations in criminal cases, and particularly in, because forensic interviews in that situation. But so, for example, if there's a CPS report in the youth court record, they're going to have to go through the youth court. This is not changing that.
And one last question, Mr. Chairman, do we know what our youth court judges say about this?
Well, this, as she said, this has been a problem. It's developing. They've talked to different youth court judges. Also, the prosecutors and others have talked about it. So, all right, do it.
Judges have already signed a standing
Yeah.
order in their circuit saying, absolutely, they're entitled to it. Let us help you facilitate. So even they recognize that this is not the spirit of the law that y'all passed to prevent defendants from being able to access their discovery. And they can't really evaluate a plea offer if they can't get access to their discovery first.
And I think, Senator Simmons, you understand that. So do I have any other questions? Do I have a motion? Motion is titled sufficient do pass. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Ayes have it. All right, thank you very much. Thank y'all for coming and appreciate that. We are going to go to if you look at your agenda, there is under the ad hoc is women, children, and families. And I'm going to, if there's no objection, call those bills up in block. And actually, I'm going to set aside 2377 and call the others in block as part of the committee. I'm going to ask Senator Boyd to run down those real quick. Remember, these have come through the subcommittee, so they've already gone through that process. And for those that don't recall, we had hearings this fall where Senator Boyd handled that, the Women and Children and Families Committee. And these bills are a result of that, and she's done an excellent job on that. So I'm going to turn it over to you to run down those bills. First of all, is there any objection to taking them in block? No objection.
All right, we'll start with 2191. This is the Foster Parents Bill of Rights. What happened is we heard from a number of people with foster care organizations. We went to a number of organizations that had a number of foster parents and represented them. We also heard from foster parents directly. We heard from CASA. We heard from various organizations that really work with foster parents. And we had a lot of foster parents reach out. They have requested to get some basic changes to the law here. If you'll start on lines 304. they have requested some basic notifications and some basic procedures that they feel like are important to be articulated in a foster care bill of rights. This, a foster care bill of rights is something that you see in most.
Senator Boyd, can you speak into
I
the
can.
mic? I think people are watching and
Okay.
listening. There you go.
All right, can y'all hear me better? Okay. So this is foster care bill of rights is something that is not uncommon for states to have across the country. And so one of the things, so if you'll look through there, basically, they're asking basically for things such as appointments, home visits, and all of that be scheduled, that they have notice of those, that they have the opportunity to communicate with all teachers, parents, doctors, and professionals. They've asked for just basic things like children to be able to, as they come into their home, be able to know their IEPs, their educational plans. Basically, if there's health issues that relate to the child, these are just some basic things that they've asked for. They want the opportunity to be able to attend all those meetings at school. They want to be able the opportunity to participate and talk to the children's guardian ad litem as they're investigating the case. And they want to be able to have the opportunity to be at any proceeding that affects the child so that they can properly care for the child, as any of us as a parent would want to do the same thing if we were caring for our own children. These things are articulated out through here and what those are, and we go into great depth with those. So I won't read through those or kind of articulate those out for you. But know that this basically just sets that foster parent up with just basic standards that they should have as any parent would working with the child. They've also asked for information relating to cost reimbursement that they are entitled to as parents. So this is just, there's also a grievance process and a grievance procedure that can go with the department if there's any complaints. And something that came up too, this doesn't create a private cause of action. So this is just really articulating how CPS and those foster parents will interact and what they have responsibilities for at that school. So that's a basic explanation of that. Mr. Chairman, do you want me to entertain questions as we
No,
go through?
let's go through each one
Okay.
that's, since we've taken them up in block, and then if there's questions, we'll take them at that.
Okay. The next bill, if I would like, I'd like to yield the floor to Senator Turner Ford to go through. This is her particular bill, Senate Bill 2192.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. 21. Actually passed committee before, but this pertains to a situation where a proposed father has actually signed stipulated agreement of paternity. The statute basically prohibits the chancellor from disestablishing paternity if that document has been signed and has been approved by the court. It does not allow the chancellor the discretion if the father has learned later that he is not actually the father of the child. So if amended and if passed, it still would allow the chancellor the discretion to disestablish paternity, even though the father has signed the stipulated agreement of paternity.
Thank you, Senator Turner Ford. All right, Senate Bill 2377.
Set that aside.
Oh, I apologize, 2384.
Okay, the next piece of legislation is the Mississippi Task Force on Foster Care and Adoption. And this legislation, we had many of the hearings that we had, we realized that we needed more in-depth information. We just realized that we began to touch the surface. Some of those things that we touched the surface that we'll go ahead and make them changes on is in 2377. But what we've done here is we've created a 17-member task force to study the various issues impacting our foster care system and adoption. And it's an array of interested parties from the Chief Justice, the Attorney General, the Executive Director of CPS, to biological parents, foster parents, and former foster children. And these are just a few of the issues that we've asked them to address. We've asked them to review and propose revisions to our adoption statutes, review and propose definitions of some of the terms that are used in CPS statutes to provide uniformity and application across our youth courts. We've heard from testimony that there's a great discrepancy of how those terms and terminology are being used across youth courts across the state. So this would give some hope, some standardization to that. We want to look at the role of the guardian ad litems and parent representatives and propose any new revisions that need to be, and also look at the role of guardian ad litems in youth court versus the role of guardian ad litems in chancery court, which are not necessarily the same. And then we also want to review federal funding we've received to ensure that we're utilizing the max amount of funds that we can pull down for the federal government, see how we're spending those funds and kind of do some analysis of that. And that is just a touch of what we proposed on that. The next bill, Mr. Chairman, I'll go ahead, is looking at 2781. Simply put, this is a website that we are proposing. It's Senator Williamson's bill. It is a website. We looked at them across the country. Texas has one that was particularly, we thought, advantageous. One of the things that we heard consistently among everybody that came through that hearing was a lack of communication. People didn't know where to go to access programs. They didn't know where to go and refer programs. The Attorney General was gracious and pointed all of those procedures out and gave us some ideas of places to look to see what they had done. So this is a website. It has to have funding will be required. So we're not voting on any funding here today. And so it won't go forth if there's not funding. But it's just a really good website. We looked at it in subcommittee, kind of examples of how that it would do. One of the biggest cries was from providers. They want to know, your pediatricians, your nurse practitioners, they want to know how to help and access where to tell these families to go. And this would be a central resource for them to be able to pull up so that we can direct in that. So, and if you look at programs across the country that are doing maybe a better job at serving women, families, and children, this is consistency and a staple that they have in those programs. So that is a very fast run through of all of that.
Well, you've done an excellent job. And the committee worked hard. Any questions on the bills that we've called up in block? Yes, Senator
Thank you,
Blackman.
Mr. Chairman. My questions are related to Senate Bill 2191. The child protective services presently notify the foster parent as to what their duties and responsibilities are.
Senator, we had, there is inconsistency with what is happening across the state. And we have some social workers that are doing a great job of notifying families of rights, responsibilities, and they are coordinating and working with them well. However, there were a number of parents that reached out in foster care organizations, some of which are here today, that reached out and said that this was a tremendous problem. And so, so this is why we've articulated, we've looked at what happened in other states. I think particularly we looked at South Carolina to see when they had issues, as y'all know, that we are under the Olivia Y case. And so we looked at what some of those other states did to do a better job and get to compliance. And this was kind of a consistent portion that they did this. The Attorney General's office also worked with us and looked at and did a survey of all those states to kind of see. And this was something that was generally codified in the states that are maybe doing a little bit better job than we're doing right now.
Okay, when you say advance notice information regarding scheduled meetings, are these meetings that's going to be at CPS, or are these meetings where they come to the home?
Senator Blackman, they are meetings, actually all of the above. They may be meetings where the child has a doctor's appointment. They may be meeting where they need to make sure the child is at CPS to see the parent, their natural parent. They may be, tremendous amounts of meetings with the psychologists, because they all have to have evaluations. And so one of the complaints that we heard from foster families is they don't get advance notice of meetings. And most of the time these foster parents are working parents. So they're having to schedule time off work to take children. And so this is why they need a little bit more advance notice of, by the way, you need to, the day of saying you need to have the child here at 3 o'clock or you need to have the child here at this doctor's appointment at 3 o'clock.
Okay, so these foster parents, they're not the ones who are making doctor's appointments for the children that the state is entrusting with them. They are not the ones who are making the appointments for the therapists and physicians, and they're not the ones who go to the parent-teacher meetings.
So Senator Blackman, oftentimes it is not the parent that is making these appointments. Oftentimes it is CPS that is making the appointments. For example, like every child has to have a psychological evaluation. And so that parent doesn't have any control over there. If it's doctor's appointments and things like that, no, it is not the parent that is making those appointments. It is the social worker in many of those cases that are making those appointments.
Okay, thank you, Senator Blackman. Senator Barrett.
We are giving advance notice, foster parents. Allow them to prepare. And maybe there was something they had in the home that they shouldn't have. That allowed them time to get that out, or is this a?
Totally. To different setting. Advance notice, really what we're talking about here is things that involve the child, taking the child to this. This is not drop-in visits with, and most of the time those visits with a foster parent are, most of the time those are appointments. This is not just a drop-in visit to evaluate the foster family. This is a visit. This is something that you're having to take the child to, a meeting you've got to have that child at, or something of that nature.
Okay, any other questions on these?
It's not somebody.
Any questions? Okay. Senator Blackman, you have a,
Well, I
What's
just
your-
wanna I have an amendment, because I do want to make sure that
is your,
this,
to 2191?
yes, sir. It's related to this advance notice of information regarding scheduled meetings. I just want something where it's clear that it's not an advance notice of going to the foster parents' home, because just like saying, I'm thinking of a scenario where I just across the summer, a guardian ad litem went to the home and it was scheduled. And the kids said, "This is the cleanest our house has ever been. My daddy cleaned it." So
Can you point a line
it said the line is 308 and 309.
and state your amendment, please?
Advance notice of information regarding scheduled meetings other than meetings where CPS or the social worker is going to the foster parent's home.
Councils, right? Okay, yes.
Senator Blackman, on line 309 before the comma, other than meetings where CPS and social workers are going to the foster parent's home.
Correct.
Okay, all right, we're on the amendment. Okay. Do you have anything else to add on the amendment?
No.
Okay, Senator Boyd.
Senator Blackman, I want to make sure that I understand the amendment you're offering. You're talking about for like site visits. Like,
Correct.
yeah, okay, that's, yeah, for like site visits to hop in the foster
That's
care,
correct.
make sure that I just want to make sure I understand the intent. Thank you.
Yes.
That's a good amendment.
Can I say site visits? Where they're
Yeah.
going to the
There's a site visit, let's be.
foster parent home for site visits.
Okay.
All right, any other questions on the amendment? You've heard the amendment. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, amendment carries. Okay, we're back on all the bills. Any other questions? Okay. Senator Branning. That.
On the same
2191.
bill, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman. Thank you. So the language of the bill, is there anything in here that would preclude the youth court judge from ordering something different? In other words, if there's a specific situation, I have personally seen maybe foster parents get outside of their lane, for lack of a better way to describe that. I wouldn't want to tie the youth court judge's hands in the event they feel the need to place certain parameters in that case to make sure that the plan is working the way it's supposed to work. The reunification plan, if that's the state they're in.
I don't think there, we tried to check that for this particular thing, and Senator Branning, we looked at that with the eyes of trying to make sure that the youth court, because everybody has roles here. You're exactly right. And so we looked at it trying to come up with the scenario that possibly would prevent the youth court judge from doing that. We did not see it. So I will say this before it comes to the floor, if you will, we are welcome for you to look at that. And we'll be happy to look at amendments because we did try to view it through those lenses as well, to make sure that we were, that we understood everybody's roles and didn't want it. This is really trying to shore up the role of the foster parent to really be able to really be the parent of that child at this point in time in their custody.
And I support that. I think it's a great, great concept. I just want to make sure there's not any unintended consequences.
Absolutely.
So thank you for being open to that.
All right, any other questions? Senator Boyd, I'm gonna ask before we call for the vote on 2191 and 2384, there's committee sub, they're technical amendments. Do you have anything to add on the committee substitutes?
No.
Okay, all right. So do I have any other questions? All right, we're on the in block on the women and children and families. Committee, all in favor, say aye. All opposed? All right, that carries. Thank y'all very much. We'll take up 2377. This is Senator Boyd's bill. In short, and this is also Child Protection Services. I'll give the overview, which is Child Protection Services, Senator Boyd's committee. I think the Attorney General's office, we've all been working to create a clear path to permanency for children in this state. What has been found is that the children are not getting through the system. We all know that we're under the Olivia Y lawsuit. This is, it's certainly been shared with me by CPS that if we can get this clear path, that this will help us get those children through there, will help us with the lawsuit. And that's what we're trying to do with this. So I'm going to let Senator Boyd hit the highlights on this bill. And we also have CPS here if there's questions directed at them.
All right, this going through the high points of this is that the first part of the bill enacts a comprehensive safe haven laws to be used with our current baby drop-off laws. The safe haven laws in section 1 through 6, it increases the time frame for a parent to surrender their child from 7 days to 30 days. Just for information for y'all, just 21 states allow from 3 to 14 days and 20 states allow for somewhere from 15 to 30. 9 states allow for more than 30, but more than half of those are 60 days of less, half of those 15. So there's not a magic to this, but we kind of looked and thought best practice was around at 30 days. A child could be relinquished to a hospital with an ER, a licensed adoption agency, a fire station that's staffed 24/7, or an ambulance. The parent may go to one of those locations, or this is new, they may call 911 if they're unable to travel. The emergency medical provider has to ask the parent to identify any other known parent or attempt to obtain any information they can on the infant's background and medical history. The emergency provider has to do a comprehensive medical screening. If the child is relinquished to the medical provider that's not a hospital, they must be immediately transferred to the hospital. CPS has to take into physical custody the infant within 24 hours of the notification that the infant is ready to be discharged from the hospital. The court has to hold a hearing within 48 hours of the infant entering CPS custody. Within 48 hours of taking custody, CPS has to publish notices in the newspaper in the area where the infant was relinquished, as well as send news releases to broadcast and print media stating the circumstances in which the infant was left with the provider and the date, time, and location of the court hearing. And the notice should state that any person wishing to assert parental rights needs to do so at the hearing. Also, if the relinquishing parent identified another parent, notice must be given to that parent. CPS has to file the petition within taking 48 hours of an infant alleging abandonment, and the TPR is in the best interest of the infant. A hearing must be held no earlier than 30 days and no later than 45 days after CPS takes custody. If the court approves a permanency plan, the order must provide that a petition for TPR must be filed within 10 days and a hearing and the TPR must be held no later than 30 days. One of the reasons that this is in here is that the procedures that we had otherwise, if you voluntarily abandon your child, you went through the same longer process with CPS just as a child that was removed for neglect. So this shortens the process down and gives that child to permanency quicker if somebody voluntarily gives up their parental rights. Then Section 7 clarifies that a child alleged to have been abused or neglected is a party to all the proceedings in youth court and shall be represented by the CPS attorney at all stages. The court shall appoint an attorney for any child that's indigent. Clarification is that the right to counsel is just not for juvenile delinquents in this process. It is for these children too. CPS is a necessary party at all stages of the proceeding involving a child in their custody. We found out that there's various different procedures across the state in this. One judge, particularly on the coast, makes sure that CPS is involved at every stage of the process. Those cases tend to move a lot quicker than cases where CPS is not a party to the process from the very beginning. So this is the recommendation by CPS that they be a party to the process from the very beginning. It amends the current membership of also in addition to those procedures, this amends the current membership of the Commission and Uniform Youth Court System and procedures to include 2 employees from CPS to be appointed by the governor and conforms the rest of the statutes to the new membership makeup. Section 10 directs the Commission and Uniform Youth Court and procedures to submit a report to the legislature each year and to submit a report to the legislature and changes that they feel like need to be made by October 1st of 2024. It amends current law to state that the youth court clerk shall give priority to TPR cases on the docket. And then the assigned judge will be immediately notified when a TPR is provided, is filed to provide for expedited proceedings. In adoption proceedings in Section 12, the chancellor has discretion to waive the at-home study requirements in cases of a step parent, relative, or foster to adopt situations, and the language should be included in Section 13. It gives the chancery court exclusive jurisdiction over all adoption proceedings except when there's a county court sitting as a youth court and they have required jurisdiction of a child as a result of abuse or neglect proceedings. In those cases, the county court has the exclusive jurisdiction to hear a petition for adoption of that child, just to further expedite these adoptions moving faster. Section 14 adds testimony and exhibits to the list of items that shall be confidential and not subject to disclosure in an adoption proceeding. So that is a very fast run through of this. And I will say this, if y'all look through things that you find later tonight, because we've done this so quick and fast, or before we present it to the board, please come see us. So, and if you're.
Wait, let's pass the bill first before you offer that up.
No, I'm just saying though, even of this, but I want to make sure that everybody knows we're amenable to, this is a lot of information to take in very quickly. So.
But it's important. So any questions? Senator Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was looking at lines 352 where CPS shall be a necessary party. Do we have language anywhere in here where both parents of the child should be necessary parties at all stage of the proceeding? If we're talking about terminating rights, adopting children, I would hate to have a situation where the mother drops off the child and the biological father doesn't know anything about it until after his rights has been terminated and the child has been adopted.
Well, let me add this on that language.
I mean, at the 31st day, since we're doing this in 30 days.
And I'll defer to Senator Boyd on the part, but when you're talking about TPR and you're talking about all that, they are already parties. This language right here that you've pointed out, why that's there is because one thing that has happened is that the CPS workers are not, they're not at the beginning. They're not through the whole process, and neither is CPS. And this is to require that they are a party through the whole process, which will actually aid in the children getting through the system. So parents are already parties through TPR. This is actually allowing or requiring CPS to be there, because what's happened is when it gets to the TPR stage, things that happened before that affect that, but CPS hasn't been involved, and so forth and so on. So that's what that's trying to do.
And Mr. Chairman, at all due respect, having practiced in youth court, I understand that there may have been several attempts of reunification, failed attempts, other relatives being involved, relative placement. But that deliberate process is a longer process, and it gives the youth court judge more comfort once you get to the TPR stage. But a drastic change in the proposal before us is the time frame. And so I am concerned when we talk about
Senator
just
Boyd,
30
can you
days, that making sure that all
address
rights
that?
are protected, and making sure we are not only doing the right thing for the child, but that we are not trampling on other people's rights, like the parents.
I understand what you're saying, and particularly this is in regards to when a child is really dropped off. I mean, this is what that, so we do have the notice procedures in here to really do what we can to find the adoptive parent, and the judge still has some discretion here into saying, I feel like we need to do another search. We haven't taken the authority of the judge away, but we are saying, go ahead, we need to go ahead and have these hearings and try to get this child into permanency as quickly as possible. So I think we feel like we have really set the tone here of like, let's move on these cases, especially when a child is dropped off.
And I understand it. It's just that it's a real possibility that the child is dropped off by one parent, and the other parent doesn't know anything about it.
Yes, and that's what we take into consideration here is to trying to find out as much information about an additional parent with the procedures that we had, and then with the notice procedures as well. Making sure that public notice is given, press releases, I mean, everything that can be possibly done to news media, everything to make sure that there's notification given that this child has been dropped off. Really encouraging, not just father, but if there's other relatives to come forward and this child.
Thank you. I have an amendment at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Senator Blackman.
But
Yes.
to me, this is in direct contradiction with what we're doing with postpartum. We're saying that a mother needs 12 months because of all of the problems, the hormonal changes, everything that a mother goes through. So if someone drops off a child, and then what happens 60, 90 days later, they are cured from this postpartum depression, and they want their child. Is there going to be a social worker involved in talking to the mother? Is there going to be a psychologist or psychiatrist involved in talking to the mother prior to, although she has dropped off the child, before we terminate the rights?
I would have to disagree with you that this is an opposition. And the reason I'm going to disagree with you is this, is if the mother is said, I'm not interested, and most of the time too, this is in situations where the mother is at the hospital and she says, I'm not interested for whatever her reasons are. And there's no judgment when I say that, whatever her reasons are, that she cannot handle this child, or that she, it's best for this child to move on, and kudos to her for doing that if she thinks that's the best decision. That is in the best interest of the child at that point. We need to move these children to permanency and placement. And I think that it is incumbent upon, this is why the procedures are going into effect, because this is happened and nothing's wrong with the mother. She has been turned over at CPS to the hospital, and we are still going through this long protracted procedure. this procedure is designed and is really put in place so that when the mother does do that, that we can quickly move these children and get them into a permanent home, because we know that permanency is the best thing for these children, is to get them into that permanent home. So this is why these procedures are kind of put into place here, is really trying to look at the child and put the child's best interest here and really move these children into permanent placement.
Well, I also know that the courts say the best interest of a child is with their biological parents. That's been the law since I was in law school, the University of Law School. And so someone may be going through some kind of traumatic mental condition when they drop that child off. But then when they get back with their family, the father, they may, through assistance, through counseling, regret what they've done. And then their child has already been, their rights have already been terminated. And it's just, okay, you lose. We've given your child to somebody else we think is better than you are, just because you were going through that problem for 30 days.
Senator Blackman, is there a question?
I was just responding.
We're on the amendment. We have an amendment before us. So what's state your amendment, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Senator Boyd and her presentation that this bill is moving extremely fast. And so my amendment is to put a reverse repeal in it to try to slow it down. And so a lot of the concerns that have been addressed in this committee could be addressed before we make a drastic change in the law.
Well, I'll state this. I think Senator Boyd and the committee, as this is under the Women, Children, and Families Committee, this had hearings, multiple hearings. And CPS has been involved in this. So I'm not really sure the necessity of it. So, but that's the amendment is this before you is a reverse repeal. Senator Boyd, anyone want to speak on the amendment?
I'm fine to put the reverse repealer in there. I would be glad to work with people on this piece of legislation. I vehemently disagree, though, the procedures that we're talking about, this has been vetted through CPS. We've had a number of the organizations that work directly with those children, like CASA, who have expressed upon this, that there is an extreme need to expedite this process, and that they have seen in their experiences that they've looked at this legislation, they vetted this legislation, and they've looked at it and said, this is a good way to go ahead and move these children, that this is in the best interest of the child. Because sometimes we forget about the best interest of the child a lot of times when we're so saying, okay, we have to preserve, the parent's right is paramount. But at the end of the day, you've got conflicting, you sometimes have conflicting goals here. And so this agenda and what we're looking at really is to put the best interest of the child ahead.
Okay, have before you the amendment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The amendment carries. We're back on the bill. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. That'll be reported out. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Let it be reflected. All right. Moving on for also under ad hoc, I'll call up Senate Bill 2146. We have some guests here, a little bit of background. If y'all remember, this committee a few years ago took on looking at unmanned aircraft and regulation. That came up twice. Those bills died for various reasons, and one of those was because the FAA was had not put out its regulations. Well, they have now done that. We have before us, and please forgive me for not knowing the full name of the association, but this bill was drafted by Senator Fillingane, and It is regulating unmanned aircraft and drones as we know. The good report is that we are on the cutting edge, and I'll let them talk about it. But our bills that we brought forward a couple years ago got the attention of many in the country, and now has led to a multi-state regulation. And so we could be on the forefront. It's one of the first states of doing this. So I'm going to let y'all just real briefly introduce yourself. I know y'all worked with Senator Phil and Gain on getting the bill drafted. If you'll introduce yourself and let the committee know.
Represent national for the World Artist Trade Association dedicated provides. Some of our members always want this bill in particular is very timely, ensured that technology by turning state in not only in the country, but maintaining the safety of the world. That they ensure that it has this bill also ensures that a sense of state for leveraging technology for purposes, right? So, ensure the state is not affected.
The other thing that we wanted to make sure is that we through a possession where collaboration makes sense between the federal side and the state side on which items are of interest to city and locality to bring powers to regulate mobile courses of action for their owners based on the outside of the federal certification they already have, but essentially to continue the leadership together in Mississippi with the existing education.
And I'm sorry. And so one of the things that we had heard back then was that some of our municipalities had concerns because the local wanted to regulate that local. This bill addresses that. Is that correct?
It does anything that it already right now. That still applies, so not trying to dictate that power. It's just putting in place certainty around the operation of the group here based around that access side of it.
And this is I guess cleaning up and allowing the airspace to people to use the airspace, for lack of a better description, and provide a common understanding and rules and regulations, because that was not what the case was before. Is that right?
That's correct. And it's also about establishing.
All right. Do I have any questions on the bill? Senator Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On line 33, you're saying that an individual can utilize this for recreational purposes. Is there any protection in here for the right to privacy? Can you point me to that?
So we didn't want to bring a specific around itself, the right side. It's something you use for or even recreational side, and there's line they're already it's expectation.
Okay, so I don't know if there's is there a law in Mississippi, since we haven't had drones, that someone can utilize it recreationally, and I'm in my backyard and this drone flies over my backyard. That's not an expectation of privacy protected under.
You didn't support it, you had someone on a fire camera and. To your point, you do speak to other just laws that are out there in the way to try to get them. Go into detail on these things. We're trying to deal with some laws that are already on the books, just have. Whatever operating system that is applied to that, as opposed to rewriting something specific for their own. Do know, don't put me on the code section. Outside, we have to do as well, and there is a code section brought forward, that's not the deal specifically then. Things related to taking photos and surveillance and those things. So that's included in there, and we just basically say, we're dealing with those laws that are in the books.
Sad they brought forth those sections in their bill.
And I think that's just part of the here.
We didn't take the time to look at them. Thank
No,
you, Mr.
that's
Chair.
not true. No, I disagree with that. The bill's what it is, so the answer's been had. Any other questions? Do I have a motion?
Sufficient to pass, so.
Motion is title sufficient due pass. All in favor, say aye. All opposed?
No,
Chairs in doubt. I'll ask for a division. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? One, two, three. Okay, motion passes. Bill passes.
it had to be, it was kids, it was kids. It was.
All right, y'all.
Trying to interrupt.
We are going to go to. We're gonna go. I know. I'm gonna have to rip out Senator McConn's gavel to do that. All right, we're going to under our criminal law, Senate Bill 2199. And this is Senator Hickman's bill. Senator Hickman, you want to explain that?
Very briefly, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much. This bill, it's a one-liner that's added to the bottom. Basically, at this point now, if you're a county prosecutor, you can't practice criminal law anywhere within your circuit district. And if you live in a rural area like mine, that includes 5 or 6 surrounding counties. What this bill does, it says that now you can't practice criminal law in any county in which you are the county attorney, but that opens up that you can practice in the other counties around you. This will be a big help to rural county prosecutors. And there are several people in the room who have issues with this right now. And that's pretty much all the bill does. There's a committee sub. I think that so many people had issues with it. The committee sub, all that does is make it effective upon passing rather than the July 1 deadline.
All right, any questions?
I have one.
Senator Blackman?
I know you wish I had something. Do we have senators who are prosecuting attorneys?
No senator can serve as a prosecuting attorney. I'm a former prosecuting attorney. I was saying like people in their particular counties or people who practice law with them are having these issues.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any questions? All right, do I have a motion? Motion is title sufficient due pass committee sub. All in favor, say aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Motion,
No, I'm saying aye.
motion carries. All right, Senate Bill 2634. This is also drafted by Senator Fillingane. Senator England, this came through your subcommittee. You want to explain that one?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so what this bill does.
Mike Paul. This bill comes from our President Attorney General's office. where they're having trouble, in some instances, after a child turns 21, they will have, sometimes, criminal charges dropped by a judge. And so they're asking for 3 years after the child turns 21 for that to be specifically outlined in the code. I spoke with their office. I know they're here today. If there's any questions that they can answer, but it's not a lot of cases that this is happening in, but there are some that they're working up cases and then they're just being dropped as soon as the child turns 21, even though there's still issues with child support that was not paid up until that point. So that's essentially what this bill does. If there are no questions, I have a motion.
All right, no questions. Your motion is,
Title sufficient do pass.
motion title sufficient to pass. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That carries. Thank you, Senator England. All right, I want to take up at this point, we've had some bills returned to us. Help me. So first, coming back to us from appropriations, I'm going to call up 2645. And that is the I'm sorry. You passed my, thank you, Pat. 2645 is the district attorneys in circuit court districts. We had that, went to appropriations. Okay. This, and I got, this is the district attorneys. We had the meeting on that, sent it to appropriation. Appropriation had an amendment. The two amendments was, we put a reverse repealer was put in. And then the language in the lines that had the about George County was removed. That's, and so we sent it to them. They sent it back to us. Those are the changes. Any questions? Motion title sufficient do pass. Committee sub, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Next, 2088. This is the operating allowance for district attorneys. And when we passed it and sent it to appropriations, the amount was raised from 35,000 to 75,000. And the amendment was made to put that at 50,000. And as was stated in appropriations by the esteemed chairman, it's been, I think, 35 to 40 years since they've had a raise in their operating allowance. So that's what the bill does. So any questions on that? Title sufficient do pass. All in favor, say aye. All opposed. And 2645. 2401. Yes, next is 2401. Thank you. I'm good. It's just right. Oh, I'm sorry. That's not, I apologize. That wasn't sent to us. You can set that aside for right now. Apologize. Okay. Yeah. I want to go to double referred, and so I'll call up Senate Bill 2336. Drug testing equipment. This came to us from drug policy. Senator Boyd, I think this is your bill. If you want to explain that, please.
This bill is to decriminalize fentanyl testing strips. This is a bill that is been passed in a number of states. Prior, they are considered right now drug paraphernalia. A lot of states have decriminalized them. There's actually federal programs that allow you to have that. Actually, the federal government will pay and send for these drug testing strips. The fentanyl crisis, y'all know what it is. It has particularly hit my community hard. Young people, I think, you know, you made some bad decisions and it's very unlike when we were, people experimented possibly. If they did, it wasn't something that was going to immediately kill you. And, today, that is not the case with the fentanyl contamination that we have. I've lost too many friends' children, because of this. And this is a simple testing strip. They're available. If you'll Google on your phones right now, they're available on Amazon. They're readily available to people. And so this is something that would just decriminalize these testing strips or really deregulate them out of the market. So this passed the House, unanimous support last week that they had for it. Yesterday I learned that the Chief of Police Association had come out in strong favor of this. So that's just a basic explanation of the bill.
Thank you. And I've made inquiries myself. My understanding is, as she said, chiefs of police, law enforcement certainly doesn't oppose it, and many are in favor of it to help and file it under the same category as Narcan and what we've done with that. So any questions on that? Senator Hobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me first state before I ask a question that, look, I get it. Some of the same friends that the boy lost or friends of mine too, who have lost children, so I do wonder if there is data to support that it doesn't increase drug use. That's my one concern. Is obviously, I mean, you know, seeing a lot of the deaths are young people, not always. Concerned that you might think about. Tested to see if it's laced with too much fentanyl, but I'm still taking poppy pills and doing other things. It's just going to accelerate drug use. Don't want there to be utilize fentanyl strips that they've seen increase drug use. Maybe not the kind of drug use that kills them and keeps them from dying. I know that's concerns there may be a slight negative.
Senator Boyd.
Senator Hobson, I'm gonna have to say this, that when we started, because this is a bill I had last year, and I will tell you that last year, that when I presented this bill and was requested to present this bill, I asked that particular question of a number of the experts that called me and talked to me about it. At that time, there wasn't a study that said it did that. The interesting thing was one of them sent me a study, and I don't have it, Senator Hobson, right now. And I don't know that I still have the study. There was an interesting study that said that, or an interesting, maybe it's not even a study, it was more anecdotal, that they had published in an article that if someone does test it and it is positive, it has a strong deterrent effect on them ever using it again. So it has a really strong deterrent effect on that. So there's one other interesting thing that my chief of police pointed out to me. He said, I want you to think of this too as a law enforcement tool. And I didn't understand when he said, how is this a law enforcement tool? And he said, because when people start seeing these testing strips strip positive, he said, I think they'll think again about ever using this again. But he said also too, it's going to take these bad dealers off the streets. Because people are not going to use these bad dealers again. So that is just my chief of police and what he has kind of shared with me on this.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I may pontificate for just a moment, since you brought up something about law enforcement, I have to say this. I've said it to some friends before, but I'll never forget this conversation I had with two friends of mine who were FBI agents. This is about 25 years ago, but I remember we were back on campus at Ole Miss. We were talking about, they said how drugs were so prolific on campus at that time. And we went back to the time that we were in school together. So, yeah, we knew some people that did drugs at school, but mostly we were hanging around drinking beer. The drinking age was 18. And they said that what they had seen, this was a long time ago, when we raised the drinking age from 18 to 21, it became a lot easier for kids to get drugs than it did for them to get alcohol. And I still still bothers me to think that I think I see a bill on here to lower the age of everything to 18. I know it doesn't include alcohol, but I just think there's been, a negative effect. I'm not saying alcohol is great either, but I'm just saying a lot of these folks drinking beer at 19 because they could get it back then. It's harder to go get a beer at the store than it is to get drugs at the corner. And that's a negative effect. I wish people would listen and pay attention to that some, because I don't know that we ever go back to that age. But I think that's one of the things that calls drugs to accelerate in our communities, because we raise the drinking age. I'd say beer is a lot less dangerous than opioids and fentanyl.
That's fine. That's what we do as lawyers.
I mean, kids can do it earlier too, and kids drink. Look, I get that they'll drink earlier, but it's just sad to watch these kids get hooked on drugs. And I've seen them, and it's my friends whose kids have died too because they get hooked on drugs at 18. They can get drugs easier than
Senator Hobson, I've had a lot of medical professionals come out saying, supporting this. And my guess is many of them see these kids. It's just like Narcan got passed because these law enforcement officials were seeing these people ODing. And it doesn't change it, but something's got to be done. So any other questions? Have a motion? Motion's title sufficient to pass. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, that carries. All right, thank you very much. I'm going to call up Senate Bill, this double referred 2079 Mississippi School Protection Act. I will say this has already been passed out by education. The reason I suppose that it was also sent to us is because there is a immunity provision in the bill. I will state that this is a voluntary program. We have the commissioner here. This is Senator Hill's bill. Sorry, I didn't. Okay. The Commissioner Tyndall's worked with different groups on this. I will say this. I will repeat. It came to us from education. So what we really are here to really look at or bring up is about the immunity provision. So with that, I'm going to let Senator Hill take the lead.
Thank you. What this bill does is allows the school to choose whether or not they want to participate in this program. It also allows whether or not they want to give a stipend for the employees that they choose to participate in this program. It also prescribes this program to fall under under Homeland Security and DPS, and it allows DPS basically to promulgate most of the rules and regulations for it. It allows for, of course, a background check, psychological evaluation, the standard stuff that you would typically think for a program like that. It also requires that they already have a permit, a concealed permit, before they take this additional training. It provides the immunity basically the same as what we put in the Church Protection Act, I believe. And Commissioner Tyndall, we just they wanted to kind of go along the same lines that we had as far as that immunity. So it basically just gives someone that wants to participate in the school that wants to participate the ability to collaborate with the school as far as communication. It also gives the commissioner the ability to work with the Sheriff's Association, the chiefs and the Sheriff's Associations, basically to have a uniform policy on response to active shooters, so that when somebody else arrives on that scene, that they will know who's in charge and who they will communicate with, so that they won't have a lot of stuff going on like happened in Uvalde, where nobody knew who was in charge and people were afraid to act. So they've looked at all those scenarios and tried to build into this bill provisions that would prevent that stuff from happening again.
And and just going to the immunity, the people that participate have to be trained, have the proper certification. just like under the Church Protection Act. And the immunity, if they're trained and they're operating in the course and scope of their employment or their operations, then that's when the immunity attaches.
And I believe it has somewhere in there that they have to be recertified annually in the
Correct.
bill.
Okay. Any questions? Senator Barrett?
Sir, who will do the training?
DPS will, they will train, or they will basically, allow somebody that they already are allowing to train their officers to train these people. Malota or somebody that's already certified to be training the officers.
Senator Barnett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill is. But my question is, was there any consideration of providing additional funding? Additional security measures instead of teachers are been put in place to be the security officer. And here's why I asked that question. It's because what if the event that there's a fight that breaks out at the high school? This could be, and during this fight, the teacher or the person that has been given the permission to have said gun or said weapon, it falls out against the floor. Or while they're trying to break up the fight, one of the individuals that's involved in the fight gains possession of this said weapon, pulls the trigger, and kills an innocent child who's running away from the fight. That I know what we're trying to do, but I think sometimes far, and we're not trying to do it. I think if we can apply additional money so that our school district can put some of these safety measures in place, we won't have that problem. And then asking a lot of questions. But then my other question is, why can't we instruct our or have our elementary students back to treat these type of things just like we would do at a college football? You go to Mississippi State to a football, carrying in a bag, and that has to be clear. On with our school children carrying in a clear bag, and for the sake of our women, that they may be able to carry their stuff in a closed bag. And if the young men are going to the school, then I've been to several schools, and there are X-ray machines. So why aren't we trying to secure our schools by those additional funding versus putting a gun into a person's hand that could be involved in something that's going to cause problems down here?
Well, okay. Very deep questions. Is there a question for Senator Hill on that?
My question, I guess my question would be, in our rush to make sure that we are really trying to keep our schools as safe as possible. And here at the end of the day, if what I said happens, will be the first ones to raise their hand and explain to that parent of that innocent child that was shot because we didn't do the thing that we should have done in the beginning versus trying to react to something else.
Well, Senator Barnett, I'll say, I think that's what they're trying to do with this is provide all options, and it's voluntary, and Commissioner Tyndall and his staff has worked on this. So we're presenting this as an option that if the school district so choose. I'll remind the committee, it's already gone through education, and those are education discussions. It came to us on the immunity portion of this.
And I understand that, Mr. Chairman, and it's gone through education. But one thing that when we talk about education, we must also remember that education involves children.
Yeah.
And we all in here either have children or grandchildren, somebody. And to me, that's that we try to come up with all measures to prevent this, but I still haven't read it here where there was any additional funding that could be given to those school districts that would like to hire additional personnel to do exactly what we're giving teachers the opportunity to do.
I think there,
that all measures have.
Yeah, in previous years, we've done the COPS grant. So do we have any other questions? Okay, Senator Barr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In response to Senator Barnett's question, I can answer it this way. The last 3 years, we have increased funding for SROs. Problem is, there are 1,100 public schools in this state. There's no way we can adequately fund enough for the SRO program to cover every single school, public school. This is an option to put a school resource officer, not a school resource officer, someone there that has been trained in every single school if that school district so allows for it at a cheaper cost to the district, and make sure it's happening and its kids are protected. So this is a way to make sure our kids are protected, because it's just not possible to fund SRO with every single public school in the state.
Well, do we have any other questions? Okay, think the pro tem had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with what you're saying, but I also very much for this bill. And the reason that maybe your school district hasn't been through it, but mine has. Pearl schools were the very first school shooting, the very first one in this whole nation. Fortunately and unfortunately, we had 2 young girls that were killed in that, several that were shot. Had we not had a teacher there, or really assistant principal with a pistol in his car, and he ran out to get it, the boy that was doing the shooting was out reloading at his car, and had he not had a pistol in the back of his head saying, drop it, how many more would have been shot? So I do agree that we do need all the protection we can get. Now, they've done several things. They have all the security you can imagine there now. They've written books on it, actually. So I do agree, and as one that's lived through it and seen it and know the children that were involved, I'm very much for this.
So your motion is title sufficient, do pass?
It would definitely be.
So we have title sufficient, do pass. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, that carries. All right, we are going to recess. We have to go on the floor at 4. We will announce the time to come back. So thank you. We're in Judd A's in recess. Yeah. What's that, Pat?
That's not quite. Yeah, I didn't come on. I got it's a single hand to the office.
Right. So when.
It's bad. Yeah. That was back. Alan Dion. It's all.
I have done now.
Veteran affairs. This one. So there was an issue about just. the
Okay, but it doesn't change it. Okay. So it's not the language that's been.
We were the lawyers. They just-
Yeah.